which in Gambia, where I studied, is one of about 7 different ethnic groups. And so most of the singing that you'll hear me doing is in the Mandinka language. I learned a fair amount of it during my 3 visits to Gambia in 2008, 2012, and 2018. So most of the songs that I'm going to play are songs that I learned from the 2 teachers that I studied with while I was there. Their names are Moriba Kuyateh, and he's the adopted son of my second teacher, the late Malamini Jobarteh, who passed away between my second and third visits. And then between the songs, I'll be sharing quite a bit about the background and the history of the instrument, so you'll get to learn about how it's built, who typically plays it, the kinds of events you'll see it played at often. And I'll also share about some of my own personal experiences that I had while over there. And then right before the last song, that's the point where I will go ahead and open up the floor for any questions that you all might have. This first song is a traditional song called Alalake. It dates back to around the late 1700s, and it literally translates to like good work has been done, and those who are responsible for that work should be celebrated. Sajo, and this is a folk story. So Mali is the country where it comes from. It's one of the other multitude of countries that you can find the Kora at, other than Gambia, where I studied. So you have Gambia, Mali, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone, and Cote d'Ivoire. So the Kora can be found all those places. This one's Mali, Sajo, and the word Sajo is the Mandinka word for the hippopotamus. And so this is a folk story, not a true one, that's of a woman who was said to have fallen in love with a hippopotamus.
called Somanda. Somanda is a Mandinka word meaning morning, the time of day. And I wrote the song over the course of many mornings about 8 years ago, when I was getting up very early for work, which at that particular time in my life was to be doing trail maintenance and construction work in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in western North Carolina. Somanda. Kora. Down here at the bottom we have a calabash, which is a gourd that grows very similar to a pumpkin. To use the calabash for the Kora, they cut it in half and take all the seeds out and all the wets, things that live in there, and it gets dried in the sun for a couple of weeks up to a month, just depending on the time of year you're building. And then you would take that half
that's been cut out and hollowed out and whatnot. And you would stretch a wet animal skin over the open half. And that would get nailed to the back side here, the round side, with upholstery tacks. And then 3 holes are cut into the calabash. And 2 of those are so that the neck that I'm holding on to, being the longest piece of wood on the instrument, can slide through the top side, down through to the bottom side. So that's 2 of the 3 holes. And then the 3rd hole right here serves 2 very important purposes. The first purpose is so that sound can come out, and the second purpose is so that money can go in. And the reason money goes into this hole serves a very important role in the cultural context, and I'm going to get into exactly why that is a little later. So you've got your 3 holes. You would then kind of slide your neck down through, and then you'd put an iron ring through the bottom of it, and you can just take a drill to put a hole through. And then most people, like my teacher here who made this instrument, will take some nylon rope and then wrap it through the loop and then around the back of the neck. And then you put the anchor strings on after that. Those are the blue ones down here, a couple of black ones as well. And then the plucking strings will be first tied off to the anchor strings and then up to each of the individual tuning rings that sit along the neck here. This bridge is not actually fixated to the instrument. So if I was going to loosen all the tuning rings here, loosen all the strings, the bridge would simply come off the instrument altogether. The wood that's used is called Kano. It's a tree that's native to the region. Both the handlebars, the crosspiece, the bridge, and the neck are all made of that. The handlebars here not only serve a very practical purpose of being held, but they also help to tighten the animal skin along with the crosspiece. You want a really tight skin to end up with, because if you put it on too loose, especially during the change of the seasons, like going into the hot and humid summers, that skin will loosen up, which then changes the positioning of the bridge, meaning each of the strings is going to move a little bit, and it just creates a difficult tuning experience, we shall say. So this chord that I'm holding is very different from the one that's behind me, and I'm about to play that one for you. The main differences, other than the fact that this is more of a traditional kora you find in West Africa, and the one behind me is not. The main differences are the type of wood that's used, the skin, the animal skin, I should say, the string material, and the tuning system. So as I mentioned before, we've got cowhide here, Kano. The tuning rings are also made of cowhides, and the strings are made of fishing line. So fishing line's been used since the early 1920s, and before that, antelope hide was most commonly used. To tune this, you physically have to move each of these along the neck. So by moving them up the neck, you're putting tension on the strings, so that's going to tighten it and bring the pitch higher, and vice versa if you go the other way. All of the tension on the rings rest on the back side. So in order to move it, to release that tension, I would have to push up with my thumbs on the front side. That will release the tension in the back and will allow you to move them a little bit more freely. And you really don't have to move them very far at all, like maybe just a couple of millimeters to change the pitch of the string altogether. This kora here was built in the US, and it uses elk skin, a combination of Paducah and Honduras mahogany for the wood, and the strings, rather than being fishing line, are harp strings. And as you're about to see, it has a very different sound quality as a result. This one here that I'm going to play is called Tabara, and it dates back to the early 1800s. It was named for Tabara Njai, who was very well liked and respected in her community at that time.
And I learned this one on my most recent trip to Gambia in 2018. Basically means when you meet someone for the very first time, you think very well of them and you'd like to get to know them better. Ninkube Kelly. Thank you.
So the people who typically play these instruments are part of what some might consider to be a class system that exists. So people are historically have been born into lineages, family lineages that perform a certain type of work throughout their whole lives. It's just passed on from generation to generation. And while there are many similar types of work in Gambia to what we see here, the people who play these instruments, we do not have an equivalent in our culture. And so these people that I speak of are called griots in the plural form, Griots. And a griot is literally a walking library. It's their cultural responsibility to carry forth the tradition dating back from the mid-13th century, almost 800 years ago. And it's all passed down orally, just from generation to generation. And the Kora is most culturally significant because it's used as one of the primary mediums for doing just that, through these traditional songs that you hear. So there are many songs about people who held political office during the reign of the Mande Empire, the expansion thereof, and people who fought in some battles to expand that empire. Songs about the battles themselves. That's just kind of a small example of all the different traditional songs. So when I was in Gambia, I would usually see the Kora played at 3 types of events, although there were more. One was very informal and laid back, and that would be held inside of family's extended family compound. Extended family living was very common in Gambia. Pretty much everyone that I knew lived with anywhere between 7 and 30 of their extended family members. So, and each nuclear family would have like a couple of rooms together, and they just kind of be, next to each other with walls and whatnot. And then the central part of the compound was usually open air, so you'd walk in from the street side, and it just, you'd be looking up at the sky, and you just kind of see all of the rooms at the outside of the compound. And so that's where a lot of this music would take place. And it was pretty rare to see the Kora perform solo like you're seeing now. It would usually be accompanied by other instruments and singers. Typically men would be the ones playing the instruments, and women would sing. In my 3 visits to Gambia, I've noticed a significant number of more women playing these instruments with seemingly less cultural resistance. Obviously, I say that from a male and outsider perspective, not from the culture. And so some of the instruments that you would see surrounding the Kora would be the balafon, which is a wooden xylophone, played with 1 mallet in each hand. The ngoni, which is a lute that's played more like a guitar. It's about this long or so, has the same number of strings. And if there was a female singer present, otherwise known as a Jelimuso, female griot, literally translated, she would be the lead, and all of the instruments would tune to her voice to bring out the best quality of her voice. And so she would be the one interacting with the audience and just kind of engaging with them, if you will. The 2 more formal events I would see these at would be weddings and naming ceremonies. And naming ceremony is a 3-part event where they would name the child during the daylight hours, usually starting around 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And then there would be a big feast that would follow, and then music would happen in the later evening hours. The naming itself took maybe an hour, hour and a half, and that segment would be held in the home where the mother of the child grew up. So she may be living with her husband's extended family at that point, but it might be flipped the other way around. And so there'd be a griot on a bullhorn saying praise for the baby, for the newborn, just kind of bringing up good fortune and well wishes. And the audience would be deliberating throughout this process as to what the child's name should be. So I would look out and I would see maybe 4 to 5 people just kind of talking with each other, kind of discussing name options. And then at some point, maybe one person from each of these groups would come up and talk with the griot and share their opinion. Throughout about an hour of that and a lot of cash exchange, the name would be determined and announced over the bullhorn. And a lot of the cash that was given to the griot would then just go to the parents of the newborn child to help support the newborn. So moving on to the feast, food, generally speaking, whether it be a special event like this or not, would be served in these large bowls that 4 up to 8 people would sit around and share from together. Eating was typically done with your right hands. You could use utensils, which were readily available. I found it easier to use my hand just based on how the food was served. And so you would have, in these bowls, cooked white rice. That would be about the bottom third, maybe bottom half. And over the top of the rice, you would have some vegetables coated in some different sauces that a lot of them had palm oil as the base and kind of a variety of spices and things that would get thrown in. And some of the most common vegetables I saw used were carrots, cabbage, eggplant, cassava, leeks, onions, things like that. And then with meats, it was either chicken or fish that was the most common. Occasionally you would see goat meat brought out for a special event, or beef occasionally, but not as much as the other two. And so each of these items, the veggies might be cut into, like cabbage might get cut into quarters, and then you would just have a quarter of the cabbage sitting there cooked and in front of you on the bowl. And carrots would get cut maybe into 4 or 5 pieces and distributed. There was fish, so they'd actually wrap the raw fish in tin foil, and my family would just put it on a grate that would sit right above the fire, and when it was done cooking, they would just pull it off and throw the whole fish onto one dish. So you'd be looking at the fish would be looking right back at you. It's kind of so that's why I found it easier to use my hands, because you just pull a little bit of meat off the fish and mix it with some carrot, and you kind of create a little bowl out of the sticky rice there, and that was the way to go. So the music would go late into the nights, and sometimes it would just be a few musicians. Occasionally you'd have a larger band with maybe 8 or 10 musicians. There were 4 members within the extended family that I studied Kora with who teamed up with another 4 from the neighboring Griot family. And they played around, 2 to 4 of these weddings or naming ceremonies a week, and that's how they made their living for the whole extended family. And it wasn't an easy way to go about it. So in this band setup, there was a lead Kora player, occasionally a Jelis, female singer. But then you'd have electric guitars, electric bass guitar, a drum set that you would see in a jazz band or a rock band, synthesizer style keyboards, and traditional drums like the djembe, Tabara drums, which are found more up to the north in Senegal, native to the Wolof people. And so everyone except for the drums would be plugged into a huge sound system. A big soundboard that had 64 different channels, and it would pump into 2 amplifiers that were 10 times the size of the one behind me here. And because of that, it carried more of the feeling of a rock concert. And so people would be up and dancing a lot. And so in order to earn their keep for the night, the bands would really have to engage with the audience. And so there'd be some praise singing involved. So maybe the second or the third song in, you would imagine that the song would be named after a particular person. Actually, I'm just going to kind of try to translate it a little bit, because let's just imagine the name of the song is Frank Jones. So when the lead Kora player or the Jelis would start singing, they'd basically be saying something in essence of, all right, here's anyone out there in the Jones lineage, here are these three things that happened like way back when, maybe in the early 1600s or so, just for example. And I'm going to talk about why the Jones lineage came to be where they are now through these events and the events that happened between then and now that is so important for our people's history. And at that point, they'd be metaphorically going fishing out there to try to see if anyone was a direct descendant of this Jones lineage. And they would say, translated from Mandinka, like, anyone out there from the Jones family, please come up and show your respect in the form of cash payments. And the reason that that type of monetary exchange takes place is because the people, Mandinka and all of the other ethnic groups of which the Griots are occasionally part of, they really value the fact that the Griots are the safekeepers of the history. A Griot can literally ask for someone's last name and start talking about 800 years worth of their family history. And because they can do that, the people really value the fact that they're able to preserve the culture that way, and they want to see that to continue. And they want to see that the Griots are financially supported for being the safekeepers, if you will. So I'd like you to actually help me with this next song. This one's called Tiramacan, and it dates back to the mid-13th century, right to the start of the empire, the Mandinka Empire. And there's a call and response singing that goes along with this. It's a battle song. It's talking about Tiramacan in battle, working to expand the empire. And so there's a 3-word response line in Mandinka, translated to English, which means the enemy was not successful at piercing Tiramacan with a sword. So just for starters, please say each of the 3 words after me, one at a time. The first word is Susa.
Susa.
The second word is Rejo.
Rejo.
Yes. And the third word is the name of the song, the name of the person. Tiramacan.
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 Good. Now say Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan.
Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan.
Good. And for the call and response, that is the response, as I mentioned before. And it sounds like this. Just sing it back to me once you hear it. And we'll repeat that for a little while. It goes, Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. Your turn. Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. My turn. Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. Again.
Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan.
Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan.
Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan.
Good. Good. So that's the response. The call lines that I sing to lead us into that, the first bit is Muru Ibang Tiramacan, which means the enemy tried to pierce Tiramacan with the swords, and then we respond with Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. I will say then, Kelike Muru Ibang Tiramacan. So Kelike is a person, basically warning that the sword is near, and then we respond again. And finally, the last call bit is Ifa Tiramacan, Iba Tiramacan. So Fa is father, Ba is mother, and it's basically meaning the mother and father of Tiramacan are basically wishing him well as he enters battle. So let's try it. I'll bring you in. It goes. Muru Yebang Tiramacan. Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. Kelike Muru Yebang Tiramacan. Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. Iba Tiramacan. Ifa Tiramacan. Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. Ifa Tiramacan. Iba Tiramacan. Susa, Rejo, Tiramacan. Good. All right. So we'll mix it together with the Kora. Tiramacan.
Moriba Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Kenke Moriba Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Iba Tiramacan, Ifa Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Ifa Tiramacan, Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan. Susare Jo Tiramacan, Kenke Moriba Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Iba Tiramacan, Ifa Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Ifa Tiramacan, Iba Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan. Susare Jo Tiramacan, Kenke Moriba Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Ifa Tiramacan, Iba Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Ifa Tiramacan, Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan. Susare Jo Tiramacan, Kenke Moriba Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Iba Tiramacan, Ifa Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan, Iba Tiramacan, Tiramacan, Susare Jo Tiramacan. Thank you.
I first began learning Kora about 16 years ago, and I came across it in a live performance, like many of you now may be for the first time. I just fell in love with the sound and decided I wanted to learn how to play. So I talked with Kane Mathis, who was the performer that night. He lived in Seattle for quite a few years when I was in Washington State, and so I figured out he was willing to teach, and I just needed to acquire a Kora at that point, which was not an easy task. You pretty much have to know someone who's been to West Africa and who's brought a Kora home, or you have to go yourself. And so for that first Kora, I was able to receive one from actually someone who lived in Maine, who had been in Gambia for a few months. And, so once I got the Kora, I started taking lessons with Kane every couple of months. I'd go up there for a lesson, and for about a year and a half of that, I went to Gambia for my first trip in 2008, and that was when I was still an undergrad at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, and I was able to get credit for being there towards my music degree. And so the teachers that I studied with, Moriba and Malamini, they were Kane's teachers as well, so Kane put me in touch with them. And at that point, 2008, it was more or less still before the really big explosion of social media and digital communication. education, at least to the degree that it is now. So I made a phone call over and just introduced myself and said that I was interested in learning how to play Kora. They basically told me that they were thrilled, and they told me that they would pick me up at the airport whenever I was ready. And they not only taught me how to play Kora, I would say anywhere between 4 and 8 hours a day. They took care of me like I was family. I really got to know each of the extended family members pretty well, and was fed very well and just looked after. And for that, I owe them a great deal for being able to share all of this with you in this form. And that said, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity. So, before the last song, any questions? Yes.
Which of the instruments do you enjoy playing the most?
You know?
The traditional one or the nonfangled new one from the USA?
Yeah, these days, I would say over the past few years, I would prefer this one more. Especially, I mean, I would say even before the pandemic started, I could definitely be more fond of this one just because it really brings me back to the feeling of being in the extended family compound, just practicing and just having family members around me and coming up and chatting with me and singing with me. It's a hard replication to achieve on the fancy Kora, if you will. So, yeah.
How many notes in the scales?
So there's usually 21 or 22 strings.
Yeah.
So you have 3 octaves. Yeah, and this one here is in G major, and this one's in F sharp minor. Yeah. So yeah, 7 notes per scale, just like most instruments.
Is it notated in Western notation, or is it just mostly taught by ear?
I mean, you can pick out each pitch if you want. Yeah, I mean, traditionally they wouldn't use tuners, but I mean it can be given a note essentially. So, yeah. Yes.
Were you just using your thumb and index finger the whole time to play string all those chords?
Yep. Yeah, just the 4 fingers. Yeah. So it may look like the other 3 are being used, but it's more or less involuntary movement than actually plucking into the strings. Yeah.
How many people play this instrument in the States?
Not very many. I would say less than 50, and that's including, I mean, immigrants who have come over from West Africa and people like myself who are not from the tradition. So there's really not that many. It's a really hard instrument to learn. Yes.
So you talk about this being an oral history. Are there efforts to actually transcribe those stories and like actually make them a book or something?
So yeah, there's definitely been some efforts. There have been a few ethnomusicologists who have put out material on just certain aspects of the history, and there's somebody who's gone as far as transcribing some of this into notation, or on sheet music basically, but no one reads sheet music to play this. So. Yeah.
Do you have any videos you can maybe send a link to us for, looking at, music from that region using these types of instruments?
Oh yeah, I mean they're all over. I mean if you go onto YouTube, you just type in Kora, there's tons out there. Yeah. Even if you go to the Wikipedia page for the Kora, there's there's multiple photos on that. So yeah. Yes.
How long does it take to create these different versions of the instrument?
I would say on average, you can put one of these together in 3 days if you spend anywhere between 5 and 7 hours. But it's going to really take a month for it to really get its tune. Meaning, when you put the animal skin on wet, first of all, it has to dry. But even once you've got everything together, the wood's together, the strings are on, the tuning rings are on, it's going to take everything to really settle, and it takes a good month for it to get there before you just know it's there. So, Yes.
How are the griots selected? Are they a priestly class? Are they families that they pass down in the tradition?
That's it. Yeah, you're born into a griot family or you're not. So it's usually, like there are certain griot families which have certain surnames that focus on a particular instrument. Like some are just Kora players, some are just balafon players, some are goni players. Some focus only on the oral history telling. There are many that do both though, as like a combination. So like the Jobartehs, like Malamini Jobarteh was one of my teachers. So they're typically Kora players. Whereas Moriba Kuyateh, his adopted son, the Kuyatehs have been historically balafon players. And he plays balafon, but he's kind of broken rank with the tradition because he plays Kora just as much as he plays balafon. And that's only been, I guess, becoming common within the last 30 years or so, where you're just starting to see, you know, a little loosening of the traditions, if you will.
Do they keep all these stories up to date, or is it all ancient history that they have in there?
I mean, it's still their responsibility to know all the stuff from 800 years ago. So, I mean, as long as they're kind of following through with the expectations, then yes, they keep
Bring it up
the
to
stories
date.
accurate and up to date. Yeah, for sure.
They use oral history because they don't have any written language.
Typically not. I mean, there are books out there with some of the oral history now, but historically it was, just passed down by word. Yeah.
So there's 50 or so Kora players in the United States get together once a year somewhere in the Ozarks or Maine or whatever, and have whatever, not up or down, but
Yeah,
where people can come.
it hasn't happened yet, but maybe someday.
So where does one go to listen to Kora music? We're fortunate that Lexington Library either found you or you found them.
Yeah.
But
It's, I mean, finding a live Kora it's not that hard. It's not that easy, I should say. So yeah, I do a lot of library programs here, but I mean, if you're at home, I just say go onto YouTube. I mean, there's lots of recordings out there of West African Kora players, and I could give you a list of names that I really like. So yeah, there's a few different ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and launch into the last song. If you have any further questions or you just want to chat, feel free to talk with me as I'm backing up here. I do have CDs available for sale. They're $15, and you can take just about any form of payment that you want to use: cash, check, credit card, digital payments like Venmo, PayPal. So if you want to pay with cash, there's a little plastic tub just to the right of the CD placard, kind of by the briefcase, so you can just drop your cash in there. If you want to pay with a credit card, come see me, I can swipe it. To the right of the briefcase, there's QR codes. If you have a smartphone, you can scan them, and it'll direct you to some of my social media sites where I'll post info about upcoming shows, post videos on my YouTube page, so you can follow me there. There's also good old-fashioned email lists. Sign up for that. I can let you know the next time that I'm in the area. Around here, if you have friends in Wellesley, I'm there Sunday at 2 at the main library. That's the one that's closest to here. I'm in Shrewsbury tomorrow, which is next to Worcester, tomorrow at 7. So this is part of a 2-week tour through Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. So, and lastly, I wanted to take a moment to thank Matt and the folks here at the library for making this all possible. And I'm going to go ahead and finish with another song that I wrote about 2-3 years ago. More like 3 or 4 years ago now. This one's called Smoky Mountain Sunset.
morning and sunset.
That's right. Thanks again very much. Hope you enjoyed, and hope to see you again.